I learned what it meant to be thrown away in the oldest place on the map, an ancient temple whose bones remembered every prayer ever whispered into it. The stones were slick with old moonlight, carved with spirals that looked like breath caught midair. Every surface felt hungry. Every corridor felt like it had been waiting for someone to break. I was supposed to be the kind of bride a prophecy celebrated, the enemy's bride, bound in ceremony, sealed with vows carved so deeply the letters didn't look like words anymore. I wore white once. I carried flowers once. I smiled, because I had to, because the court demanded a performance, because my enemy's family needed a sacrifice shaped like love. When the bond snapped, when betrayal rippled through the hall, I was already halfway to being blamed. They said the ring burned my finger before I ever touched it. They said my vows shook the temple's wards. They said my presence made the altar bleed. People always found it easier to name a monster than to admit the truth. The temple didn't choose who it harmed. It chose who walked in with a secret. That night, everything turned fast and wrong. Vespera, always poised, always too gentle with her words, stood beside me like a perfect shadow. She wasn't family by blood, but she wore the influence of someone who'd learned which hands to shake. She'd smiled when my wrists were bound. She'd guided me toward the bridal steps with a soft voice meant to sound kind. Then came the accusation. The altar's sigil flared, not with holy light, but with something sour, something that crawled under skin. I felt the temple's wards surge like a tide, and I tried to steady myself, tried to keep my breath even. But the ring was cold. The vow was wrong in my bones. Vespera stepped forward with a practiced gasp. I turned, because I thought she'd help, because I thought she'd say my name. Instead, she pointed. A crowd is a creature. It doesn't think. It feeds. Their torches rose higher, their faces sharpened into teeth, and the words came out of mouths that had once asked for my blessing: witch, curse, traitor. The enemy's bride, corrupted. The woman meant to join two houses, now meant to pay. I tried to speak. My voice came out thin. No, I said, and my hand rose instinctively to the ring. The ring wasn't a ring anymore. It was a key the temple recognized. The stones answered it. For one breath, I saw the truth like lightning behind a curtain. The enemy's family had set traps inside the vows. Their sigils were laced with a counter-prophecy meant to activate only when the bride's blood was near. They'd needed me alive enough to walk in, needed me obedient enough to be blamed when it happened. But the crowd didn't want truth. They wanted an ending. When the guards seized my wrists, the temple's air turned heavy, as if it wanted to swallow me whole. I kicked out of the first hold, caught myself on cold marble, and in the chaos I managed to shove my palm against the floor. I didn't know why I did it. Instinct. Some part of me remembered the old stories, that temples listened when people pressed their fear into stone. The temple listened. Not kindly, not gently. It opened a seam between moments. I fell through a crack in the air and hit forest earth on the other side. My clothes were ripped. My wrists were bruised. My throat tasted like iron. I ran anyway. I ran until the temple vanished behind trees and fog. I ran until the sky looked less like a ceiling and more like an honest thing. And in that endless motion, my rage became a quieter shape. Survival. By the second night, hunger turned my thoughts into knives. I scavenged berries that tasted like rain and learned which routes to avoid. I listened for movement, for men returning for what they'd lost. I slept in broken places, under fallen trunks, in shallow hollows lined with old moss. When I woke, my dreams were still full of torches. And then, on my third night, I heard something that didn't belong to the forest. A roar. Low, animal, powerful enough to rattle leaves. Not human, not storm. A sound that made my ribs tighten as if my body recognized it on a deeper level than my mind. Then came the pack. They moved like shadows with intention. I found myself crouched behind a boulder before I even decided to hide. Between the branches, I saw dark shapes, wolves or wolf things, too large for ordinary beasts. Their eyes flashed pale in the dim, their coats thick as night. They didn't hunt. They searched. For someone. For me? My throat tightened. I should have run. I should have stayed quiet. But my power, whatever the temple had awakened inside me, was waking too. It wasn't controlled. It wasn't safe. Still, it pulsed faintly when the pack's scent brushed my fear, like a thread tugging on the same knot. A howl split the trees, and the Alpha King stepped from the darkness as if the forest parted for him. Kaler. Not a myth, not a story told around fires, an actual man carved out of threat and restraint. His armor wasn't just metal, it was a statement. He moved through the world like it had to earn his permission. His beast came with him, not as a separate creature but as a presence under his skin. The air around him felt heavier, charged. Even the wolves didn't approach like they did with lesser lords. They hovered at a distance, wary of his mood, except when my scent hit them. When the pack smelled me, their focus shifted. The nearest wolf lowered its head, sniffed once, then sat back on its haunches like it had been given a command from a higher place. My heartbeat stuttered. Kaler's gaze found me through the leaves. I hadn't meant to come out of hiding. I didn't want to be seen. But the moment his eyes latched to mine, the world felt narrowed to a single point, me at the edge of his reach. He didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. His beast moved its attention like a blade turning slowly. I rose anyway. Not bravely, not stupidly, carefully, because I still had a survival instinct sharper than terror. "Don't," I said to the wolves, to him, to whatever cruelty lived in the air. "I didn't come for you." Kaler's jaw flexed, his wolves shifted. One stepped forward, then stopped as if the beast in Kaler had thrown a pause into the world. The Alpha King's eyes tracked my hands, my wrists, the bruises. He knew what it meant to be harmed and blamed. I didn't know that would matter. Until his pack turned toward the tree line where I'd come from, toward a path of my tracks that were too fresh to be coincidence. Someone else had been watching. Someone else had tried to find me. Before I could move, shadows shifted behind the boulders. A woman's laugh slid through the trees like a knife through cloth. Vespera. She looked untouched by the night. Her hair gleamed as if moonlight had decided to flatter her. Her scent, silk over rot, made my stomach churn. "You're late," she called to Kaler, like she and the Alpha King shared old bargains. Kaler didn't look away from me. His beast remained fixed, as if my breathing had become part of its routine. Vespera's smile sharpened. The temple bred a liar. The bride was meant to die, so she can't be trusted with anything alive. My fingers curled against my palm. The words threatened to boil over, but before I could speak, Kaler took a single step forward. The wolves surged just slightly, then held. His movement pinned the forest in place. "You're the reason she ran," Vespera said, but there was no question in it. She was trying to control the story. Kaler's eyes stayed on me. His silence was worse than anger. Silence was a wall. Then I saw the wall begin to shift, not from his mouth, but from his pack. The wolf nearest me moved its head toward my bruised wrists, sniffed again, then turned and pressed its shoulder into the earth as if it offered ground. Another wolf dragged a length of cloth from beneath leaves, something soft enough for human skin. They weren't threatening, they were caring. I stared like it might be a trick. Vespera's laugh cracked. "She's not yours." Kaler finally spoke, voice like stone dragged across steel. "No." That one word held a refusal so complete the forest seemed to flinch. His beast stirred, impatient. "Not mine," he clarified, not to me, but to Vespera and the lie she carried. "Not yet." The pack tensed. The way their bodies braced told me more than his tone could. His beast wanted, not just me, some fate connected to me. And Vespera realized it. Her eyes narrowed. She shifted her stance like she planned to strike without making it look like violence. "Take her," she told the wolves. "She belongs to the temple's curse. You'll thank me when she—" Kaler lifted his hand. Not a command, a stop. The wolves froze mid-motion. They obeyed him so completely it made Vespera's confidence wobble. I didn't understand the rules of this world yet, but I understood power. Kaler's power wasn't just in muscle or teeth, it was in restraint. He could have let the pack tear her apart. He could have used his authority to erase her. Instead, he kept her in view like a threat he wanted to handle with patience. Vespera backed away, her smile returning too quickly. "You can't keep her. The prophecy will—" Kaler turned his attention fully on her. The wolves leaned toward him, bodies tight. "Say it again," he said. Vespera swallowed. She didn't say the prophecy. She changed tactics. "You're protecting the wrong woman," she hissed. "She caused the temple to break." My chest tightened, but I stayed quiet. Quiet was a strategy. Quiet let me watch. Kaler's eyes flicked to my wrists again. The bruises looked like marks from a binding ritual. Then his gaze dropped to my hands, to the faint scorch beneath my collarbone, where the temple's seam had cut me open when I fell through. He saw it. My skin prickled under his stare. Then, slowly, he approached. Not the way a predator stalks, the way a sentinel closes distance when he already knows the path is safe. I didn't step back, but I didn't step forward either. My agency mattered, even if my options were shrinking. Kaler crouched slightly so his eyes met mine at equal height. The air between us felt like a drawn bowstring. "You smell like someone who didn't choose exile," he said. He didn't ask my name. He didn't ask permission. But his voice was controlled enough to invite truth. I swallowed. They blamed me. His beast shifted, and the wolves around us lowered their heads. Not submissive, listening. I could almost feel his pack sorting facts like they were scents. The Spera stepped back into the shadows, ready to disappear if the tide turned. Kaler's eyes followed her briefly, then returned to me. "I know what betrayal smells like," he said. The way he said it, like he'd learned it the hard way, made my throat burn. I wanted to ask him what he knew, but I couldn't risk giving him too much of myself too soon. Instead, I asked something sharper. "Why are you here?" His jaw tightened. His beast shifted in his chest like it was restraining anger. The temple. Prophecy. I saw the prophecy in his posture even without the words. "The temple's wards are thinning," he said. "Something is waking inside it." I stared at him. "Then why me?" His eyes narrowed. His beast surged faintly, like it had been waiting for this exact question. "Because it pulled you through," he said, "and because the pack won't let what it recognized walk alone." The wolves behind him lifted their heads in unison. No one had told them to do that. It was instinct shaped by his presence. I hated how much it moved me. I hated that hope could still take root when everything inside me had practiced dying. Kaler rose. He didn't touch me. That restraint, again, felt like an offer. "Come to the keep," he ordered. But his tone wasn't a command built on domination. It was a decision meant to protect. I should have refused. I should have run again. But the truth was, I was already trapped. I was hunted by the story they'd planted in the temple. Vespera would keep chasing me as long as the prophecy could be twisted. If Kaler's world was dangerous, at least it had rules. At least with his pack watching, the forest wouldn't swallow me whole. Still, I didn't accept blindly. "I won't be a prisoner," I said. His gaze held mine, and the beast behind it calmed, like it understood the boundary. "Then you'll do what you've always done," he said. "You'll live." That was all. No chains, no promise spoken like a lie. I moved with them anyway, following the scent trail back to his territory. The path deepened into ancient ground, roots like knuckles, stones carved with older marks than the temples. The keep didn't look built. It looked grown from a pact with the land. When we reached the threshold, the air shifted. The walls were old, but the keep felt alive, watching, deciding. Fires burned in iron braziers. Torches flared without smoke. Kaler didn't announce me. He just walked. The pack moved around him, forming a moving perimeter. When we passed through the gate, guards in dark cloaks bowed just slightly. They didn't bow to me. They bowed to the beast they feared. I felt that sting of rejection anyway. Not cruelly offered, coldly measured. Kaylor led me through corridors that smelled like wood and herbs and something metallic that reminded me of blood without tasting it. He turned into a chamber with a broad hearth and shelves lined with old remedies. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he looked at me the way a man looks at a wound he can't afford to worsen. "Sit," he said. The word wasn't harsh, but my body didn't listen immediately. I stood, looking around. Ordinary details steadied me. A bowl of water, a stack of cloth, a mortar and pestle. Not a throne, not chains. "Are you going to punish me?" I asked. Kaylor's expression didn't change much, but his beast did. I heard it in the air, like a low growl pressed behind his ribs. "No," he said. "I'm deciding how to keep you alive without turning you into a target." I blinked. Those weren't the words of a tyrant. They were the words of a man who knew what it cost to protect someone and still keep his power intact. My throat tightened. "Then help me heal." It was an ordinary request, and somehow it sounded like authority coming from me. Kaylor stared for a long moment, then nodded once. He reached for the cloth and brought it to my wrists without touching my skin first. He held it there so I could choose whether I wanted it. I took the cloth. Only when my fingers wrapped around it did his hand withdraw. That small choice, his patient permission, did something inside me. I still didn't trust him, but I trusted myself. I tore strips of cloth from the roll and wrapped my own wrists with careful hands. Pain flared. I breathed through it. Kaylor watched without crowding. His pack, somehow, stayed quieter than the room. Then I stood and moved toward the shelves. "Where are the herbs?" I asked. "Do you know what you're doing?" one of the guards asked from the doorway. I turned my head, meeting his eyes. "I know what it means to be hurt without help." Kaylor's gaze sharpened. Not because I insulted the guard, because I answered like someone who'd learned. I found dried leaves, bitter roots, and a resin that smelled like pine and smoke. I ground them into paste, mixing with warm water. The scent filled the room. It reminded me of old villages and hands that weren't trained for miracles, just trained for survival. When I applied the paste to my wrists, the burn eased. My skin tightened like it was returning to itself. Kaylor finally stepped closer, stopping at the edge of my space like he still honored my boundary. I looked up at him. "You brought me here. You can't keep acting like you only want my body." The words surprised me as I spoke them. I'd been the enemy's bride in a temple built for cruelty. I'd been dismissed by everyone except my own desperate instincts. I wasn't going to become another story that someone else authored. Kaylor's jaw flexed. His beast stirred, impatient at the idea of being challenged. But the pack didn't punish me. The wolves didn't surge. Instead, the Alpha King's gaze softened by a fraction, not into tenderness, but into understanding. "I want your life," he said, "and I want the truth you're refusing to give away." I held his stare, then asked properly. He studied me the way a strategist studies a battlefield. "Who did you trust before the temple betrayed you?" he asked. My mind flashed with Vespera's smile, with the way she'd stood beside me as if she belonged to my side. "My enemy's house," I said carefully. Kaylor's expression darkened. That wasn't anger at me, it was recognition. "Vespera," he said, naming her without asking my permission. My blood turned cold. "You know her." "I know what she wants," he replied. My wrists throbbed faintly as the paste settled. I didn't realize I'd been clenching my jaw until my teeth ached. Kaylor's beast shifted again, and this time the pack at the doorway leaned forward, ears angled, attention locked. He wasn't just angry, he was protective. "Tomorrow," he said, "we return to the temple." My stomach dropped. "Why?" His eyes held mine. "Because you didn't fall through by accident." My breath caught. "How do you—" Kaylor's gaze flicked to my crescent burn scar beneath my collarbone. "I've seen that mark," he said. My hands tightened around my own healing cloth. "Where?" He didn't answer directly. He told me instead in the way beasts speak without words. The wolves outside began to howl in a pattern, 3 short, 1 long, like a code passed from bone to bone. Then the chamber doors opened. A young wolf, smaller than the others, still growing into its power, trotted in and stopped near my feet. It smelled my wrists. It whined once. Kaler's beast stilled. The young wolf nudged my leg gently, then looked up at me like it expected something. Something ordinary. Water, food, comfort. It wasn't a demand. It was an invitation. My chest tightened. I dropped to a knee beside the wolf, hands steady. "You're hurt," I said. The wolf's fur was intact, but its paw carried a faint tremor when it shifted its weight. Not a wound, more like pain that lingered too long. I didn't fight the urge to help. I didn't ask Kaler permission. I didn't wait for anyone else's authority. I healed it. I inspected the paw carefully. I cleaned it with warm water from the basin and applied a paste of resin and herbs I'd learned to make in desperation. The wolf exhaled like a pressure released. Its body relaxed. When it looked up at me, its eyes softened. The pack, every wolf in the doorway, watched as if my hands mattered more than Kaler's reputation. I stood slowly, wiping my hands on cloth. Kaler's gaze didn't leave mine. There was something in the way his beast tracked my movement now, something different from the first hour. Less guarded, more certain. Not love, not yet, but a choice forming in the dark. That night, I didn't sleep in a grand room. Kaler offered me space, yes, but he also kept distance, as if he feared what his presence would do to my mind. I made my own bed on furs near the hearth. I kept my boots beside me. I kept my hands ready. When I woke at dawn, I found a bowl of water and a fresh strip of clean cloth placed carefully at the edge of my makeshift shelter. No guard hovered, no servant waited for thanks. A gift offered without demand. I stared at it for a long moment, then picked it up and folded it neatly. If I was going to be trapped in this world, I would at least choose what I accepted. The days that followed were slow burn in the truest sense. Not the romance kind of slow, but the pain kind of slow. Each hour I spent in Kaler's keep taught me something new about the lines between threat and sanctuary. Kaler's walls came down one brick at a time, not because he softened dramatically, because the pack softened with him, because his beast learned I wasn't a weapon. I took on ordinary tasks, cleaning stone floors, sorting herbs, grinding spices for stew. I did them with hands that had once been accused of witchcraft. I hummed quietly when I worked, low notes vibrating through my ribs. It wasn't for him. It was for me. Humming kept my mind from spiraling into the moment the temple accused me, and the wolves, strange, instinctive creatures, began to respond. They didn't gather like hungry dogs. They gathered like they were calming their own hunger for chaos. Kaler noticed. I didn't ask him to notice. But I watched the way his pack's movement changed when I hummed. I watched how their eyes would turn toward me when I returned to the same corners every day. Like a pattern. Like a ritual. Vespera, of course, didn't stop hunting the story. When the time came to return to the temple, she appeared again at the keep's edge, escorted by men who pretended to be loyal while their hands never stopped measuring distances. She wore confidence like armor. "You're wasting time," she told Kaler. "That woman belongs to the prophecy that will tear your line apart." Kaler didn't move toward her. His pack moved instead. The wolves formed a barrier at her back like a living wall. Vespera's breath hitched. Her smile became brittle. "Do you think they'll protect you?" she asked me, voice sweet with contempt. "They don't know you." I met her gaze steadily. "They've watched me heal their wounds." Vespera's eyes flicked to the young wolf who stayed near my ankles, then back to me. "Healed wounds don't mean she's innocent." "No," I agreed. "They mean I'm not dead." Kaler's presence tightened behind me. I didn't turn, but I felt the way his beast leaned close, like it wanted to shield me from the taste of Vespera's lies. "Enough," Kaler said. It wasn't a roar, it was a boundary. Vespera looked at him with the kind of anger a woman keeps hidden until it's useful. "You don't understand what you're walking into." Kaler's gaze remained on the forest path leading to the temple. "I understand betrayal better than you do." The words weren't sentimental. They were warning. We traveled at night. The temple waited like a threat that didn't need to chase. The air around it grew thick as fog, and the carved spirals on its walls seemed to pulse faintly, like a heartbeat under stone. When we approached, I saw fresh scorch marks near the outer steps, evidence that someone had tried to reopen the seam I'd fallen through. Vespera's earlier knowledge wasn't rumor, it was planning. My skin crawled. Kaler moved in front of me, his body a shield without violence. The wolves circled behind, making our entrance feel like an approaching verdict. We reached the inner hall where the altar waited. The air was colder here. The same spirals carved into the floor looked deeper now, as if the temple had fed on fear and sharpened itself. When I stepped forward, my scar burned. The crescent mark beneath my collarbone flared with heat, like a brand remembering purpose. Kalor's beast shifted. His pack went still. Even Vespera hesitated. She stared at me with an expression that wasn't only hate, it was uncertainty. "You shouldn't be able to return," she whispered. My breath shook. Yet I'm standing here. Kalor's hand hovered near my back, not touching yet. It felt like a promise made in silence. "Tell me the truth," he said, and this time his voice held a tremor he kept caging. I lifted my chin. I trusted her. I didn't say her name. Vespera's face tightened anyway. Kalor's gaze sharpened, his beast growled low. I turned slightly so I faced Vespera. "You used the enemy's house to trap me inside a vow." Vespera's lips curled. "If you weren't so eager to play bride, you wouldn't have been chosen." Chosen. The word hit like a slap, because I'd believed I was selected by someone else's power. But the temple had chosen my suffering like a tool. I swallowed hard, then reached for the vow engraving on the altar. My fingers traced the carved letters without touching the center. "Your sigils were built to activate when my blood was near," I said. "The temple didn't break because I'm cursed. It broke because someone wanted it to." Vespera's eyes flashed. "And yet the altar recognized you." I turned my head, meeting her gaze. "Recognition isn't consent." The temple answered my words. Stone groaned. The spirals on the floor surged with faint light. Not bright, not beautiful. It was the color of old bruises. I felt something inside me reach outward, like a hand pushing against a door I hadn't known was there. My ordinary power, my ability to heal, to calm, to listen, wasn't the whole truth. There was more. When the temple's light touched my scar, it flared into a pattern matching the carvings. My breath turned shallow. I could suddenly sense the temple's pathways. I could feel where it sealed and where it opened. Kalor's voice cut through my panic. "Lysera." He almost said my name like it had been stored somewhere safe. I flinched, but I didn't pull away. The temple's light turned toward me like a spotlight. Vespera stepped forward, eyes gleaming with victory. "See? It's you. You're the key. You're the curse." "No," I said, voice stronger than I felt. "I'm the lock's opposite." I didn't fight. I didn't strike. I simply pressed my palm to the stone where the seam would open. The air tore. A scream of old magic filled the hall, not like a person shouting, but like the temple itself being forced to admit what it had kept hidden. A vision slammed into me. I saw my own future and someone else's past intertwined. Kalor's line, sealed by a prophecy meant to end his enemies once and for all. The temple didn't create destiny, it amplified it. Long ago, an earlier Alpha King had attempted to break the curse by binding the wrong person into the wrong vow, trying to use a bride as a shield. The vow broke. The temple punished everyone involved, and the only reason I'd survived exile was because the vow had marked me with the ability to unseal what others had locked. My power wasn't destruction, it was choosing what to heal and what to end. The vision ended, my knees nearly buckled. Kalor caught my elbow before I fell. He didn't yank, he stabilized. The contact sent heat through me, alive, not cruel. His pack pressed close, their warmth anchoring me to reality. Vespera shrieked, and the sound snapped the temple's light into chaos. She had expected the temple to crown her narrative. Instead, the prophecy turned its face away from her. The altar's center glowed. A mechanism clicked in the stone, something ancient shifting. A hidden corridor opened, revealing a dark chamber filled with relics, broken rings, shattered sigils, and a prophecy tablet that had been kept from the public eye. Kaler stared at the tablet like it was a wound he'd tried to forget. Then he read. His face didn't change much, but his beast did. The wolves around him lowered their heads. Their bodies trembled with recognition. Vespera lunged toward me, too fast, too desperate. I didn't fight her. I didn't have to. Because the pack moved first. A large wolf stepped between us, blocking her without tearing flesh. Teeth flashed once, not out of cruelty but out of command. Vespera stopped, breath ragged. Her eyes darted to Kaler. "Don't you see?" she pleaded. "It can still be fixed. She can still be sacrificed the right way." Kaler's voice cut like a clean blade. "No." Only one word. A final boundary. The temple's light stabilized, no longer hungry, now attentive. It turned toward me like it finally understood the difference between victim and key. I stepped closer to the open corridor. The relics inside hummed, and my scar pulsed in answer. I reached for the broken ring, careful, respectful, and the moment my fingers touched it, images flowed again. Not visions this time, memory, my memory. The truth of that night wasn't only that Vespera framed me, it was that the enemy's house had wanted to erase me after using me. They'd planned for my exile to be permanent, so when the temple opened the seam, it wasn't saving me by accident, it was preserving me for the fulfillment to come. Kaler watched me, the way the pack watched me, like my choices were becoming part of the temple's language. I turned slightly, looking up at him. "You believed me at first," I said softly. "Not with words, with what your pack did, with what your beast refused." Kaler's gaze didn't waver. His beast growled once, low and restrained. It wasn't a declaration. It was a confession delivered through restraint. I swallowed. "Now believe me again. Vespera orchestrated everything." Vespera's face drained. Her confidence slipped, replaced by fear. Kaler stepped forward, and the wolves made space as if they were giving him room to decide what justice looked like. His hand closed around the temple tablet, lifting it from its place. The stone trembled and then settled. He looked at Vespera. "Your story dies here," he said. "No gore, no spectacle, just the crushing finality of prophecy corrected." Vespera tried one last trick. She shifted her focus to me, eyes blazing with hatred and something like panic. "If you accept his protection, you'll become his weakness." I stood straighter. My agency mattered. "I already escaped weakness," I answered. I stepped closer to Kaler, not into his arms, but into the space he offered. My hand rested lightly on his bronze war collar, the first time I allowed touch with intention. "I'm not a bride anymore," I said. "I'm the one who heals what others broke." The temple's light brightened a fraction. The wolves exhaled. Kaler's beast stirred like it had been waiting for permission to release. His hand finally touched me, thumb against my wrist, slow, careful, like he was learning how to be gentle without losing power. "Then heal me," he said. It wasn't romantic in the way stories lie about. It was an urgent request from a man whose walls had been built to keep pain out. I could feel his restraint, the way his beast kept snapping back from the edge of tenderness. I didn't let the moment rush. I moved to the altar's edge and did what I'd always done when fear threatened to swallow me. I worked. I gathered herbs from a pouch Kaler kept hidden among his supplies. I ground resin and leaves until the paste became smooth. I applied it, not to my own wrists this time, but to the crescent scar pattern on the stone tablet, tracing the same marks I'd felt in my skin. The temple responded. A warm surge rippled through the hall, sealing fractures in the prophecy lines. The corridor behind the altar stabilized. Kaler's pack lowered their heads in synchronized relief. For the first time, I saw the king's control fracture, not into chaos, but into something raw. He looked at me like the world had just changed shape. I lifted my gaze and met his. He didn't ask permission to step closer. He did it slowly anyway. His forehead touched mine for one beat, brief as a vow. His beast exhaled like relief. My breath caught. I wanted to run from hope as I always had, but my power had taught me something new. You can't heal only what hurts. You also have to stop abandoning what might save you. So I stayed. I stayed when the temple's last light faded. I stayed when the corridor opened fully and revealed the heart chamber of the prophecy, where ancient bonds were meant to be reforged only with truth. Kaelor presented the tablet to the stones. The air shook. Rings clinked somewhere deep in the temple, as if lost metal had found its place. I felt the bond inside me shift. Not a forced chain, a choice. When the final mechanism clicked, I realized the shocking twist that made prophecy dangerous. Vespera hadn't simply lied to frame me. She'd been trying to bind Kaelor to a path that would end him. Her curse story was a weapon meant to keep the Alpha King trapped inside a cycle. But I wasn't the curse. I was the counter key. And because I healed what I touched, because I offered ordinary care instead of rage, the temple accepted me as the one meant to fulfill the final line. The prophecy wasn't about destroying Kaelor. It was about saving him from the only love he'd never been allowed to choose. Afterward, when we left the temple, Vespera was gone. Not taken, not killed, simply separated from the narrative she'd built, no longer able to convince the stone that her truth mattered. Kaelor's keep welcomed us with silence. The guards didn't bow to me now. They watched me like they expected growth. I didn't become queen by decree. I became queen by contribution. I healed a wolf's torn tendon. I fed the pups without being asked, leaving small bowls outside the birthing den like offerings. I hummed while I worked, and the youngest wolves eventually rested near my legs without fear. Kaelor started attending tasks at the edge of my routine, not to command, to observe, to learn. His walls came down slowly. One day he spoke to me while I cleaned the throne room floors, voice low, words clipped like he wasn't used to sharing anything tender. "I dreamed of the night you fell through the seam," he said. My hands didn't pause. I refused to look at him for too long because fear was still a reflex. "Did the dream show you why you weren't there?" Kaelor's breath hitched, and his beast pressed closer to his skin as if it wanted to correct the past. "I wasn't allowed," he admitted. I finally met his eyes. That admission, through him and his beast, shown in restraint, was more honest than any confession. I wiped a section of stone, then set my cloth down. "Then next time, be there." Kaelor's gaze darkened, his beast growled, but the pack didn't punish me. Instead, they watched like my words were training Kaelor's heart. He took a step forward, then another. He didn't touch me until I tilted my head in invitation. When he finally wrapped his hand around mine, his grip was warm and steady, not possessive. Possessive would have been too easy. This was deliberate. "I will," he said. The slow burn wasn't romantic because it was effortless. It was romantic because it was earned. He began to trust me with harder truths. He told me what betrayal did to him before he learned to contain it. He told me about the prophecy tablet's missing line, the one Vespera had tried to erase. He told me that his beast recognized me because the temple had already marked me as the one who could unseal what prophecy locked. He didn't say love. He didn't need to. His pack followed me like a living instinct. His beast stayed close when others approached. His walls didn't collapse quickly. They became doors, opening on their own. I, too, changed. Not into a submissive bride, into someone who knew how to hold power without becoming cruel. When the next seer arrived, trying to scare the court with prophecy again, I hummed softly and walked to the edge of the circle where the seer tried to speak lies. The wolves calmed at my sound. The court quieted. The seer swallowed fear, because my presence didn't fit the terror story they wanted. I didn't fight with spells. I didn't spit venom. I fed the seer's trembling hands with warm broth, offered gentle herbs to ease their shaking. Ordinary care, extraordinary consequence. And the prophecy, corrected by my healing, finally turned into something stable. Not a trap, a promise. One night, Kaelor took me to the temple ruins outside the keep, the place where the stones still held faint memory of prophecy light. He stood at the threshold and waited, as if he was asking the world for permission to speak. I stayed beside him. The wolves circled, silent. My scar pulsed faintly, remembering the moment the temple accepted my truth. Kaler's beast stirred, and I felt it like weather. He spoke quietly. I fought monsters in my life. My breath caught. He continued, voice rougher now. But the worst was the version of me that thought protection meant distance. I stared at him. My hands curled gently around the edge of his sleeve. "Then stop hiding behind walls," I said. He looked at me like the command belonged to fate. Slowly, he lowered his forehead to mine again, longer this time, a measured contact meant to reassure both our beasts. "I chose you while you were still being blamed," he said. I felt my heart punch against my ribs. Then he lifted his head and let his eyes, storm gray, fierce, trapped by restraint, rest on mine. "Now I choose you when you're finally able to choose back." I exhaled, and it was almost a laugh, almost a sob. I didn't pretend I wasn't broken. I was broken, but I was also here. I lifted my hand and traced the claw-mark scar across his brow, not to hurt him, but to acknowledge the history etched into him. "Your beast came to me first," I said, "and I survived because I kept feeding what needed healing." Kaler's breath shuddered. His pack shifted, whimpering softly, like they had been waiting for this sentence. I looked past him toward the ruins and imagined the temple's old stones listening. Then I turned back. "I'm not your weakness," I whispered. Kaler's voice dropped to something raw and controlled. "You're my chosen." The wolves bowed their heads, not in subservience, in recognition. The bond settled around us like warm armor. I didn't feel trapped. I felt aligned. I had been falsely accused, cast out, and thrown into danger by a story meant to destroy me. But I survived by being ordinary, healing, feeding, humming, cleaning, until the hidden power inside me became visible. And when Kaler's walls finally gave way, it wasn't because I begged. It was because I grew. We returned to the temple one last time when dawn bled into the sky, and this time the stones didn't roar with hungry magic. They breathed peace. I stepped onto the altar's inner circle with Kaler beside me. The young wolves watched from a safe distance, wagging their bodies with that silent joy only pack instincts know. I pressed my palm to the stone. Kaler placed his hand over mine. Together, we sealed the corrected prophecy, not with violence, with truth. The air shimmered, and my scar cooled into a gentle warmth instead of a burn. Kaler's beast settled at my side. His pack fell into a calm rhythm. I looked up at the Alpha King and knew, with a certainty no accusation could steal again, that exile had been a doorway, one that led me straight into the arms of the man who'd learned to choose instead of control. My story didn't end with a curse. It ended with a bond. And when Kaler kissed my knuckles, soft as a vow, firm as a promise, I let myself believe the prophecy at last. Because this time, it wasn't trying to trap me. It was finally trying to keep me.